Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License Flight Number 8 with service to New York City's hottest new restaurant, Nolita. We ask that you please fasten your headphones at this time, secure your podcasting device, and remember, if you did not purchase a separate ticket for your Chilean sea bass, they are not allowed to take a seat and must be stored in the seat in front of you.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Jeff Kurbis, joined by my co-pilots, Max Singer, as well as Rich Inman. How you boys doing today?
Hey. Oh my god, every time. I haven't been able to make it through a single one of your intros without laughing on the recording.
I am hungry to dive into today's episode.
God,
no,
all right, podcast
we're
over.
done.
I'm
All
so
right,
sorry. I'm so
shortest
sorry.
episode of all time. Well, for those who are listening and not sure what Nolita is, we are doing the early 2000s limited run series, and that's putting it kindly, Kitchen Confidential, based off of Anthony Bourdain's book. But when it comes to the world of food and kitchens, while we enjoy a really nice airplane meal, usually cooked in a microwave, this may be a voyage that is unfamiliar to us, an airspace that we really need to have help being navigated around. So we have invited our first guest pilot. Our guest pilot today is an up-and-coming star in the world of food, media, and entertainment. She is the host of the web series Dead Dad's Kitchen and the podcast Bites of History. Please make sure to press your call button when welcoming Irene Walton.
Yeah, Irene.
Hi. I am so fatal for these intro. You are quite the writer with your sexy little intro voice. I love this. Thank you so much. I feel so fucking accomplished for the first time in my life. Well, thank you so much. That was such a beautiful introduction. Thank you guys for having me. I'm honored to be your first guest. Oh my guest pilot. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I'm a little mad you made me watch the show, but I'm excited.
There we go.
Yeah, I was going to say,
that's what I was
the welcome
expecting.
was the last compliment we're getting from Irene.
I already have a grudge.
Yeah, well, Irene, I wish we had you here under better circumstances. But before we dive in too much to Kitchen Confidential, we'd love our audience to learn a little bit more about you and what you're doing outside of, watching a early 2000s show starring Bradley Cooper.
Oh my gosh. I to be fair, I watch a lot of early 2000s television not starring Bradley Cooper, so that's a big part of my life. But yeah, you did such a beautiful job of introducing me. I created and host my own cooking show called Dead Dad's Kitchen, where I make all my dead dad's old recipes and kind of like introduce people to cooking through a lens that might not be so like upper echelon and scary to dive into.
Oh, cool.
And my podcast Bites of History it's like a really short form podcast, so it's only like 15-17 minutes each episode, where I talk about just like food history and how we got Hershey's chocolate and how pizza came to America and just like little things like that, because I love old shit and I love food. So
I have to say, prior to us filming, I did see your thing on the Mr. Hershey, and I was transported back in time to when I was in the second grade and did a report on Mr. Hershey. So
he was the only person I did reports on.
Huh?
It was crazy. I have no idea why. I wasn't from Pennsylvania, but I did every report on him. That's so funny you say that, Jeff. Thank you for listening.
Let's transition from such a historical figure into such a historical TV show known as Kitchen Confidential. Rich, when we do these shows, you tend to have a question that is on your mind.
Yeah.
I would love to just, let you go at it.
Oh my god, of course. So, this is more of an open-ended question for everybody. This one's less angry. The last few episodes have been, why are you making me watch this? Or what on earth could possibly be your connection to the show?
Yeah, I took a lot of flack in the Alpha episode.
It's a big rip on Max segment. My thought watching this episode, and I think this is pretty timely based on the shows that have come out this summer, but is this the original The Bear? And did this walk so the bear could run 15 years later?
Rich, I'm so glad you asked this. So when I watched this show, I said literally to myself, this is a generic version of the BBC limited run series Whites, which I highly recommend to everyone. It also only ran for 6 episodes, but it was so good, and it was like it went around the entire concept of like a chef trying to get his Michelin star.
I
It
love
was
a show where you
wonderful.
can like go through the entirety of it in a long lunch break.
Yeah,
Most shows on BBC could also just be called Whites.
Jesus. Yeah, it's Great British Bake Off.
Oh my gosh. But as far as it being so Bear could run, I think the early 2000s were such an interesting time for food as a whole. Like, and we're sort of coming back to that connection of Americans love food. We love talking about it. We love experiencing it. We love even our horror shows somehow diving into a little bit about food. We're going to talk about Hannibal during this podcast. I will make sure of it. But this is one of those things where, yeah, I definitely think there had to be some form of failures or prototypes before we could get the Bear.
At the end of the day, both Kitchen Confidential and The Bear are similar in that they are these redemption arc stories. They are very similar in a lot of ways, but it also just goes to show how far the standard for what makes fine dining has come in the last like 17 years or so, seeing how simple some of these dishes on this show look compared to the intricacies and marvels of The Bear. The Bear also has the benefit of having like a really touted kitchen supervisor on set with them, whereas I do not think this show did at Fox.
I don't know if anybody had ever cooked anything that worked on the set of Kitchen Confidential, honestly. I think you bring up a really good point of like, in the 2000s, it was a different world of food. Like now food is its own whole industry beyond food. And whereas like, granted I was, a kid more or less, but like, I don't think people really started caring about the like level of their food up until the early 2000s. So I feel like this probably was one of the first shows where people were like, oh yeah, I do kind of want to go to that like cool new restaurant that opened. And like when you see a show like this that comes out, you're like, oh, I kind of get like a peek into the like back house, even though it's not a legitimate peek whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I'm sure, was interesting to people in 2005.
Early 2000s primetime food, though, I think is still very personality driven, less so than food driven. I think back to probably all of our folks watching Emerald live on the couch together. And it's like, I don't think it really matters what Emerald made. You're just watching Emerald. You're watching this larger than life, boisterous, loud personality entertain you. And I think that's still what food is. You wanted to see a guy in a white coat putting on this show for you, and you were going to eat up whatever it was because you cared about them more than the dish itself.
I was actually, in preparation for this episode, I visited the Culinary Institute of America a couple days ago. Completely unrelated. I completely I forgot that we were doing this show when I booked the trip. Which I probably should have asked more questions about, but they can, now.
Like, did you ever see Kitchen Confidential starring Bradley Cooper?
You didn't need to ask any questions. Clearly, the people on this show did not.
They did. We were talking about like there's like a brand new wing that's been dedicated to Anthony Bourdain because he's a former student and everything. And my friends that were there were actually shout out Chelsea and Tony, friends of the pod. They told me that they were, they had some like really famous chefs come by and like speak on for the memorial and everything. But they said they could also track the enrollment of CIA based on how popular there is a food thing in the media, and they're both like very worried at how many people are going to enroll because of the Bear. And I know that after Kitchen Confidential, I'm positive there were a ton of people who signed up to be chefs or to learn how to be a chef at the school.
That's amazing. What a great story. I mean, Rich, after our previous couple of episodes, I thought you were going to say, what's the worst place you've ever eaten? And I was fully prepared for it. Or have you ever found a thumb in your food? But
Jeff, it sounds like you want to just put that out there anyways.
We can talk about that in a little bit, but Max, before we get too deep into this podcast, for folks who might be joining us for the first time to maybe listen to us or listen to Irene, what is this podcast all about?
If this is your first time flying aboard the TV Pilot's License, we are a podcast that analyzes and reviews the pilot episodes of some of the most famous, or in this case, infamous, episodes of TV throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. We figure out if these shows we made today, whether or not we can keep watching them, and what works, what doesn't. We hope you have a good time with us.
Yeah, we decided only the 20th and the 21st, not the 19th century of television.
I hate you.
Why not? There's some great stuff.
So when the train was coming towards you.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the synopsis of Kitchen Confidential. A bad boy chef runs wild in his New York City eatery. It's just that 3 times through, and I pulled this from IMDb, so I'm really impressed.
I was like, Jeff, you could take it back.
Max, can you tell us a little bit more about a bad boy chef runs wild in his New York City eatery?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned up top, Jeff, this show is inspired by and based on Anthony Bourdain's memoir, Kitchen Confidential: Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly, which was released in 2000. This book immediately propels to the top of the New York Times bestsellers list. It's part culinary memoir and part a sort of deep dive into high-end restaurant kitchens and some of their shady practices. From its time on the New York Times bestsellers list, Bourdain becomes this massive food media star almost overnight. He's being compared to people like Hunter S. Thompson and Jack Kerouac when it comes to food writing. We always joke about like the trope of like who's going to write the next great American novel. And to a lot of people, this was Anthony Bourdain doing just that. Obviously, such a big personality and such a dive into this industry creates a little bit of a media frenzy to get the rights to the memoir. And funny enough, this was not the first project based on Kitchen Confidential. Originally, the rights to this memoir were owned by David Fincher, who planned on making this his follow-up film to Panic Room, with Brad Pitt attached to the Anthony Bourdain role and Benicio del Toro in talks for a major supporting part. Unfortunately, this film turned out to be all sizzle, no steak, and fell apart soon after, with Bourdain wanting to take a long absence after finishing Panic Room. So in that time, the rights became acquired by producer, creator extraordinaire Darren Star, who you may know from works like Beverly Hills 90210, Melrose Place, and at this time had just finished Sex and the City. So this is supposed to be Star's next big comedy. This is supposed to be big budget, sexy New York TV in the wake of Sex and the City. But for every Beverly Hills 90210 and Sex and the City, Darren Star also had shows in this time like Central Park West, Grosse Pointe, The Street, which is spelled with a $ instead of an S, and Mismatch.
Nope, hate that a lot. The only show that can do that is Our List.
The other co-creator on this is a writer and producer by the name of David Hemmingson. You may be familiar with him as a writer and producer on NBC's Jessie, as well as the executive producer and writer on Just Shoot Me. So he'll be the one writing this pilot episode with Darren Star directing. And that takes us to our premiere on September 19th, 2005.
Oh my God.
Get out of here with this research.
I know.
You guys are crushing this.
We have dug so deeply into IMDb.
We did so much more research than the cast of Kitchen Confidential ever did.
Truly.
And the thing is, everything we're saying up top says that this is supposed to be a hit for Fox. We'll get into the cast a little bit later on, but this is a stacked production. The people who are involved are big names. A lot of this cast is coming off of really big runs of shows. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but expectations are really high for Kitchen Confidential, Bradley Cooper. What happened?
Boy, I don't know what happened to Bradley Cooper, but I don't think we'll ever see him again after 2005.
I wish the kid from Wet Hot American Summer well.
Yeah, I wish the villain from Wedding Crashers the best of luck.
Oh my God, he's crab cakes in football.
Yes, he is.
Holy shit.
And he's hot in everything he does.
It's true.
This was truly the only time where I was like, Bradley, like, this is a little cringy. Like, what's going on, babe?
So I have to ask for everyone. I recently was doing trivia and found out that Bradley Cooper is the most recent person to be nominated for 3 Oscars in a row. Now, with that being said, do you think after watching this pilot that would ever have been a possibility for this man?
Not with this writing. No.
That's the thing. I don't think Bradley was terrible in it, but it was just such. I'm so curious if you guys feel this way about it. It felt like it was like 3 different styles of show all together at once. Like, certain scenes I was like, this is very Sex and the City vibes, and then this other scenes I was like, is this fucking Serving, the movie from like 2003? Who the fucking kid is also in it?
Yeah.
This movie was just, or the show was begging to be on a cable channel and not a network. I think it's definitely a little held back by the limitations of being on Fox.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because let's just even go to the opening of the show, right? We have this like amazing.
Ooh, is it time for a little amuse, Jeff? Are we
a little
palate warm up?
Yeah,
palate warm up for the main course.
A little air moose boosh. Like a plane.
Oh my God. So we go into something that, we've had small bits of this, of narration to start a show. And we get the narration of Bradley Cooper's character, Jack Bourdain. Why it could not be Anthony, I have millions of questions about, but we're not going to talk about that right now. And Jack says, in nice quotes, "From the age of 8, I knew exactly what I wanted to do." Within 10 seconds of that, he is doing coke in a kitchen surrounded by women, and I don't think any 8-year-old has that in their imagination.
He's not just doing coke in a kitchen, he's doing a line of blow through a piece of penne pasta.
What?
It's quite a way to do that.
Yeah, I've never even thought about that before I watched this pilot.
What would be
innovative.
the goofiest noodle to do cocaine through?
Oh my God, a few silly bucatini.
It's like a crazy straw.
For sure.
Meanwhile, Bradley Cooper doing an ambiguous regional accent that is somehow the entire Northeast of the United States.
Yeah.
Accents are definitely not a strong suit for the entirety of this cast in this show. I don't even want to get into Pino and his accent changing from the voicemail to the next scene to the next scene. But as far as this intro goes, I hate to give the show any form of credit whatsoever, but it does give us some decent exposition into a very quick, like, this is who Jack Bourdain is. He once was on top of the world, and then he fell on hard times.
Being a culinary show, though, you had to get Jack Bourdain's recipe for failure.
Oh my God. I was watching it, and I was like, Max is going to have something to say about this.
Yeah, because when you take
raw talent,
when you take
cocaine, and it's like, get the fuck out of here.
Take 1 part natural talent, 2 parts stellar education, mixed with easy success and a generous helping of booze, drugs, and women.
And then the punch, when he punches like the restaurant manager or whatever, and there's like the aggressive fake punch noise.
Oh, the Foley work on this is absolutely incredible. I mean, I think if you had to describe like the position of Muppets having to do cocaine in a scene, that is what the Foxification of them doing cocaine really is. They all come up at once, like they were all just doing it together, like snorting from the same like big trough.
Do you want to see a version of this show where it's like a gritty kitchen drama with the Swedish Chef now?
Oh hell yeah! I would watch The Bear with the Swedish Chef like 100 times a day.
So we're gonna talk about recasting Jack Bourdain maybe a little bit later, but I'm 100% signed on for Swedish Chef Jack Bourdain. After this introduction, we get the Foley punch of a lifetime. We find that Jack is now working in a restaurant, still keeping his high standards in maybe not the highest of standards place. in a familiar Little Italy tourist trap.
This was the one part of the show where I actually like giggled genuinely for a second. I was like, oh, that's cute. Like, I get that. That's cute.
I actually did have a nice hearty laugh at the waiter singing the word
Lasagna
lasagna as the Marriage of Figaro by Mozart.
They had to have. How many takes do you think they forced that poor actor to do of that?
One. He's a natural.
Like Samuel L. Jackson.
That was the one part where I was like, oh, this is cute. I could see this being a genuine thing that happens to like a fine dining chef who just still like, food is so much in their soul, it doesn't matter where or what they're doing.
But they make him look like such a pretentious asshole. Like, he's talking about rigatoni being a noble pasta. And it's like, oh, shut up.
That's the one thing that I find very interesting. Like, if we look at Darren Star and his career as a writer, right, and we look at, like, a show like Sex and the City, or we look at 90210, one of the things he does so well is write to make a character, no matter what lifestyle they come from, someone you root for, even if they're a terrible person. Carrie Bradshaw's a terrible human being. We'll get into that in the Sex and the City episode. So the thing that I was just shocked with Jack is obviously our protagonist. I do want to see him fail. Like, I'm sort of starting this show thinking, like, I want to see Jack Bourdain fall flat on his face.
The only time we see him have any sort of a soft spot or anything where you would be like, oh, he did change, is like the last 2 minutes of the show, which I'm sure we're not getting to yet, but like, yeah, they don't do the thing where it's like, but he's actually got a heart of, like, you don't see him volunteering at a soup kitchen because he also loves food. Like, he's just like, I still hate where I am. Fuck you. And it's like, okay.
Nothing will make me happy, even success.
Yeah.
And, like, in the most early 2000s move, we see a white guy who's down on his luck fail up and we'll learn that his resume was submitted to the hot new restaurant Nolita that is in the need for an executive chef.
Who doesn't have a chef 2 days before they open, doesn't have a kitchen staff. Like, they haven't been prepping food for months and months and months and building this menu. That, Max, tell me if you feel this way, because I was thinking that even just, like, from working at a place. And, like, a food place. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing. That immediately pulled me out of the show. I was like, there's no fucking way that could have ever existed in the world of food in fucking 1950 or 2005.
I know you need an inciting incident to get the action going here, but there's something about you have no food, no staff, you have 300 of the books, and you reopen in less than 48 hours. Like, what? Like,
oh god, they did the Marvel joke.
What's not like? You must be some kind of Suicide Squad. Like,
yeah.
They did the friggin' Marvel joke. They did the I have to do X, Y, and Z in under 3 minutes. Where do I sign up?
I was going to call this Kitchen Ocean 11, but I think the Marvel joke is great. Those are Terry Benedict's casinos.
Hold that thought for like 60 seconds, Jeff. Because once we get to Nolita.
Yeah,
Oh, this is the most cool, beautiful restaurant I've ever seen. Mama, it is 6 tables with folded napkins. I was like, there's no shot they're saying this for real.
They didn't turn any one of those napkins into a swan.
I know.
Well, we do get to Nolita. We do get to see those 6 tables that some poor PA had to put out, and they definitely folded those napkins. But we do get to meet the man whose voice changed from a voicemail to in-person, named Pino. And Max, were you making me wait for a certain actor whom plays Pino?
I mean, we could talk about Frank Langella, legend of stage and screen, and also played Skeletor in the 1980s He-Man movie.
Yes.
By the way, talking about the Bradley Cooper getting 3 straight Oscar nominations, like, Frank Langella is going to get an Oscar nomination like 2 or 3 years after this show for Frost Nixon. So, like, again, people like who were on this show go on to do great things. I'm rooting for you, John Francis Daley, the next few years. But I was going to talk about one of my favorite tropes in all of film and TV.
Oh, is it the team assembly?
We got to put a crew together.
Yes!
I've never seen this in a TV show before that wasn't like blatantly making fun of that premise.
So like when you called this like Kitchen Ocean's 11, I'm like, yes, we got to get a crew. Let's do this.
Yeah, like it's really talking about a show that does a really good job of making fun of this. I couldn't help but think of the Rick and Morty, you son of a bitch, I'm in.
Yep,
and just
time.
Like, because he was just selling every single person on like these make-believe benefits. Like, I have never worked in a restaurant, but when he was just like, oh yeah, we have dental, I was like, hell no, you don't have dental. Like, some corporate like businesses don't even give dental.
Well, and if the whole thing of like good writing is show don't tell, there's literally a character who goes to Jack, be like, how you gonna do that? Like, tell us, Jack.
I had an itch that was scratched, but it was like Joey Plates, kitchen extraordinaire thief, like in the typewriter font. I was like, I kind of live.
Yeah.
So let's break down the crew. So
Yeah,
first
I was just
we
about
meet
to say.
Seth.
Yeah, so we meet Seth, played by Nicholas Brendan, who is our pastry chef, but also, if you're not familiar with that name, he was one of the leads in Buffy, just very casually here.
We meet Teddy. Wu, seafood genius.
Yeah, played by John Cho.
John Cho.
Which is just
Friend of the pod.
absolutely absurd. Then we get to meet Owain Yeoman. I hope I pronounced that right. Because
I think it's Owen. I think it's
Owen?
North
Owen Yeoman?
Irish.
Yeah, Owen.
Yeah, it's Owen Yeoman.
Owen Yeoman, who is Steven, who's our sous chef, but also a kleptomaniac and possibly still very addicted to most forms of drugs, as well as a sex addict.
You may know him as in 2004 playing Lysander, the captain of the Trojan army in Troy.
Yeah, which
Wow.
is just wild. But then we get to meet two other characters after this crew is assembled with a bunch of lies and false promises. We get to meet Mimi. That is not a typo. Mimi is something that someone chose when they were writing the script to name a character. That's played by Bonnie Somerville, whom you might know from NYPD Blue. She also was in the OC as well as Jamie King.
Yeah,
but
she's
that's a different episode.
Rachel, who tries to seduce Sandy Cohen in season 1.
Oh man,
Oh.
the threads, they're threading.
Everything's connected in the TV Pilot's License universe. But we meet one other character. We meet Jim, played by John Francis Daly, whom I know from Bones, from quite a long run on Bones as well. Like, this cast is insane.
He's like a real life. What's the hell's the character's name from Ratatouille? He's very much he's that guy. What is
Oh,
this?
Linguini.
Linguini. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Our pasta expert.
So he's in Waiting, which comes out 3 weeks after this pilot airs.
Which is
so
insane.
John Francis Daly spent like an entire year in just fake kitchen sets.
Man, this guy's big back of house energy.
After we meet the entire crew, we get the idea that, like, hey, there's some good joke, or I don't want to even say good. There are some jokes about, like, oh, let's call this guy. Basically, we're going to haze him. John Francis Daly's just going to be the pledge. Like, Darren Star, I don't know if he was in a fraternity, but boy, did he give off the vibes of this show was written by a frat bro.
It was weird though, like it was such a poorly written and like executed character. 'Cause,
Yeah.
like for whoever has worked in restaurants, like you don't just become a sous chef because you know where the fucking onions are. Like he's like dropping the onions and like begging for his job, but he's a sous chef.
Yeah, it's pretty high
made
title.
No sense.
It's definitely just extremely odd. But as soon as we get this crew together, we're magically transported to the first day. So we lose a day completely. The
We only had 48 hours, Jeff. We're running out of time.
we are running out of time, but everything there
We're
is
gonna need a crew.
zero training is happening. Zero menu preparation is
Zero
happening.
Food is happening also. I don't know if you guys noticed this in the kitchen. There's like a plate with something on it.
There was a line at one point where
It's tasting
John
menu.
Francis Daly's character Jim is like, I was working on that for 30 minutes, and I was like, no shot in hell were you working in a major restaurant for 30 minutes on a single dish.
You gotta get those fire types down, boy. We gotta get these plates cranking.
He was also working on writing "Happy Birthday" on a plate. I don't know if you guys caught that.
He's from
that
Utah,
was what he was
and I don't know if Utah people can spell. If that,
Was
if
he
that
from
is
There's a
Utah?
pastry
Yeah, he
chef.
was from
There's a
Utah.
pastry chef extraordinaire, and why is one of the prep cooks doing the chocolate writing?
I have so many questions.
Max and Irene is people who have both written on cakes professionally.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if we were in the back writing "Happy Birthday" for 30 minutes, we would have been absolutely fired.
As soon as we get through the crew assembly, we are in the first day. We're told by the character of Steven that we have to go and talk to the front of house staff. During this, we are introduced to Tanya, who is our hostess. Mimi is there, very disappointed that she has no say in who the chef is. We also get a appearance from one of my favorite character actors, Sam Pancake, just appears.
Sam Pancake.
And
Damn it.
playing for maybe the one and only time in his career, a straight man, but God bless him. And
That
no,
man
he's
erotically
definitely
put
not.
a breadstick in his mouth and talked about how hot
can we
he thought
talk
Jack
about
Bourdain
that
was.
breadstick a little bit? Because it
Yeah,
looks
that-
like it's a
And how
soft
it was
breadstick.
the
and then-
crunchiest, grossest
I
thing in the world.
I chipped 3 of my teeth watching that scene.
Absolutely. Yeah, he goes which, to be fair, I did very much vibe with Sam Pancake when Bradley Cooper's yelling and he's like, "I think I love him."
Yeah.
I was like, no, that's exactly right.
We all have the same trauma response.
But let's talk about what got this trauma response. Bradley Cooper decides to make a statement by going to the front of the house and introducing everyone to Greg. Max, who's Greg?
So, Greg is a Patagonian toothfish, more commonly known by its hip rebranded name of Chilean sea bass, because no one was ever going to eat a Patagonian toothfish, but you could charge $30 to $40 a plate for Chilean sea bass.
Yeah, this is probably the one time of the entire episode where I'm like, okay, I really like Jack's character because he is emphasizing the importance of the insane logistics that took this fish from Chile out to New York, and how important it is to like make sure it's top quality when it gets to the table, because like, I don't know, food waste is a massive problem in the U.S. and
What's bonkers,
people
though,
weren't
in that
talking about
segment, though, is Jack is breaking down the literal seconds of each portion of the dish and how tight and intricate everything is from prep to plate to table. Yet we saw people like dicking around taking 30 minutes to do dishes merely minutes ago. So like it feels like Jack is on his shit. Like it's one of those moments where you're like, okay, I actually do believe this guy is good at his job and he is accomplished as a chef, but I don't necessarily buy it from the other people around him, and that makes it a little bit confusing to me.
Yeah, it's almost the reverse fish out of water concept of what we've been seeing, where there's
Well, yeah, he's holding the fish,
yeah,
Jeff.
no,
God
that's
damn it.
that's very
God damn
true.
it. God
You're
damn
just
it.
on your A game today.
Three food puns in. We're not even halfway through the episode yet.
But it is so interesting to see this person who seems so high regarded as a chef and so on point as a chef. We see him do zero cooking. We see him describe food beautifully. Very similar. Like that was the only part where I really connected to, like, oh yeah, Anthony Bourdain maybe had something to do with this pilot, because the
He
way
mostly just looks hot and quotes Top Gun.
I mean, so does Anthony Bourdain, R.I.P. But like in all senses of the word, this was the
He
only
had
moment.
the need for speed in a different way, though.
There we go.
It's an addiction joke.
Yeah. Oh God. I'm so sorry, audience and sponsors. But as soon as we're done with this Greg monologue, that was definitely how Bradley Cooper got this role. We are then brought to seeing our hostess Tanya get a phone call as she is booking a reservation for Daisy Miller.
I will say, and I'm not somebody who like brings this up often because I don't think I'm educated enough on like feminism to dive in, but the way that Tanya is portrayed in this show
Oh boy,
is so egregiously terrible.
I know. Let
It's
three
like-
men jump in on this subject too.
Yeah. It was like awful. As a woman who's been a host, it's just like it made me mad how accurate it was when the customers were interacting with her.
Oh my god, that scene
They
made me
made
roll.
her
Ugh.
dumb as a rock. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't think that was super necessary.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's portrayed as this sort of like ditzy blonde, the way that she like butts in and interrupts Jack's
Yeah.
speech throughout the monologue with like thinking she's got this like gold star pop quiz answer, the way we see customers treat her, interact with her, and even at the end, like her relationship, like the way the other chefs perceive her. Unfortunately, with this show, you get a real boys club dynamic in the kitchen and some real negative like comedic tropes and stereotypes towards the front of house staff, mainly who are women and like queer men, which definitely dates the show's comedy a good deal.
Yeah, it's just that thing of like, I think the interaction with the men that we see in a few minutes, like when they're talking to her, I think that's literally spot on, unfortunately. But like the dumbness of her, which probably sounds dumb of me to say it that way, but like just like how stupid she is in this show is like, that was so unnecessary. Like she could have been like any other hostess I've ever worked with, who's just like cute and nice and friendly and good at their job,
Yeah.
and then also get hit on.
It's a real shame because it appears, now we only watched the pilot here, and thank God in the case of this show, it appears that the writers of this show were like, oh, all of the wit, the only woman or female character on the show who could be smart is Mimi. That's it. Everyone else,
The mean one.
everyone else, dumb as a rock.
And Suze. And
and-
Suze. Suze is definitely like,
Yeah,
you know,
Suze
has
is
her shit
definitely-
together.
Either dumb and nice, or mean and hot, and like that. Or mean and smart. Like those are but everybody.
Yeah, everyone in this show is pretty attractive. So I was about to say, Irene, like, please.
No. Everyone has to be hot, but you're either dumb and nice or mean and smart.
I mean, this is Darren Starr's culinary underbelly. You must be hot.
You have to be. Every chef is very, very attractive.
How soon after was this from Mean Girls? Because she reminds me so much of how Amanda Seyfried's character was written in
Oh
Mean
my
Girls.
gosh.
Yeah.
That's so true.
I don't know what's like acceptable in like the cultural landscape of this, but I feel like that character would definitely not be.
It was not out of like, it didn't surprise me for as soon as I saw her. I was like, she's the dumb one.
Yeah.
Like it was immediate.
It's so interesting because we brought up how Waiting came out 3 weeks after this show premiered. One of the big differences I found in this show, and like I recently watched Waiting like a couple months ago, and Waiting did such a good job in writing its every character having some form of edge and being realistic. And
you
the
watched
concept.
the Dane Cook vehicle 2 months ago?
Well, Dane Cook's only in that movie for like 20 minutes maximum, so I was pretty pleased by that. It's more of a Ryan.
That's heavy screen time.
It's more of Daddy Ryan Reynolds movie.
That's
to me.
more time than Heath Ledger's Joker gets in The Dark Knight.
But going to the point of why I would talk about a Dane Cook vehicle is because I think that one of the things that show does, as well as like we talked about The Bear a little bit, is that show, both of those shows and / movies give edge to every single character, give 3-dimensional depth to every single character. And this show, when it comes to the female characters, just decided, nah, we're good. We're gonna just move on and let's not focus on the food.
But we did mention one of the, I hate to say it's like smart characters, but with Mimi, you do get the first real obstacle to Jack, who has somehow followed his way up to this point. He's gotten the gig. He's back on his feet. He got his crew. And now we finally have someone who's maybe standing in his way, does not think he's all he's cracked up to be.
And something, call me crazy, do I sense a little bit of sexual tension between the two of them? If we were to maybe watch a couple more episodes, would they somehow fall in love miraculously?
I think there was sexual tension between him and Greg the Patagonian Toothfish. He wants to fuck every single person on the show.
He has more chemistry with Greg the Patagonian toothfish than any other character in this show, including his girlfriend, Suze. We'll get to Suze in a little bit because she's definitely an MVP of this episode. Let's quickly just get to the dinner service because Jesus Christ, what a mess. We do find out, I would hate to go a little bit out of order, but Biddy Schramm, whom you might know from Monk, plays Reese Ryder, a.k.a. Daisy Miller.
There's a more important Biddy Schramm role that I will not let us go without discussing.
No, there sure isn't. More important
Apart
than Monk,
with
not on this podcast.
Apart with being Sharona in Monk, Biddy Schramm is also on the receiving end of one of the most iconic lines in 90s cinema. Because she plays Evelyn in A League of Their Own, who Tom Hanks exclaims at, "There's no crying, in baseball!"
Oh my god. Wow. I love her
amazing.
so much. She's been in like everything I love.
So we find out that Bradley Cooper's character, Jack Bourdain, cheated on Reese Ryder, and he begs her not to come to the restaurant. We can
with her sister, and he very blatantly said, he's like, "Sorry, I nailed your sister." I don't know why he's going to bring up like that again.
Yeah, now we have Hallmark cards for that.
So we find out Jack really doesn't want Reese to come. Reese insists that she has to do her job and be semi-partial.
On opening night! Yeah. What food critic is coming on opening night?
One that's not looking to give a good review, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and also, what restaurant isn't having like a soft open, a friends and family? It's so... I have to just like resign myself that this is not like a real restaurant, but it's still just so annoying.
I know you have to raise the stakes for entertainment value, but this whole like we only have 48 hours thing creates so many flaws in how a restaurant of this caliber and like investment portfolio actually operates.
How did they get that fish 3,000 miles away there in 48 hours? Just in general. How did they get it there?
Magic. The magic of cocaine. So we've been talking a lot about the idea of the opening night. Let's dive into it a little bit because there was a lot that goes on. One, it starts off in the idea that they have these 300 reservations, but the restaurant looks fairly empty for the most part. And also, how did Reese Ryder get a reservation to a restaurant that there are 300 reservations already booked for that opening night? That's a logistics question I'll never be able to answer. But the kitchen is popping. It looks like everyone is doing pretty decently at their job, but we have to invite some form of chaos into this episode, which includes a couple of different options. Should we start off with the concept of a thumb or where Reese is sitting?
Oh, let's start off with Reese at the host stand and her little logjam with Mimi.
I mean, I sort of feel for Mimi. I think Mimi like nailed it as a hostess in that single bit.
She's like, "Wow, that's actually so funny. That's not your name." So
I think it's just an example though of like because Mimi is portrayed as mean, so she has to have her comeuppance. And in this example, it's because she hasn't listened to Jack. She's not aware of Reese's pseudonym, and so she doesn't know like what she's looking for on the reservations book. And if she was actually communicating with her team, she would have known who to look for, but because she's so headstrong and hates Jack so much, she didn't take that time and it ends up backfiring on her.
I always feel for hostesses. I think they have a really unfortunate job of just being bearers of bad news, especially in today's restaurant climate where like it is impossible to get seated at some of these really nice restaurants without knowing someone who works there. And she does a hell of a job being like, "Oh, I will seat you, but it's going to be right next to the women's..." Was it the women's or the men's restroom?
the women.
A place where you're famously allowed to put tables.
That's the... I was like, I would never... There's sometimes a table like near the restroom. There's not one in the stall practically.
You never get hit by the door at your table.
No, it's like a Three Stooges like joke that they just like held on to for 60 years.
And they also like cut back to it. Was it like 4 or 5 times that she gets hit with the door? We're like, get it.
Someone thought that joke was really funny.
It was Anthony Bourdain, actually. He was like, I'm not doing the show unless you hit her with the chair 3 times.
The rule of threes and repetition are so important in comedy, and that really was proven during Kitchen Confidential. But during this, we do get that scene with Tanya where, once again, feel for the hostesses. And, like, I think the show did a really good job of showing what hostesses deal with. So I would not be surprised if someone who worked in the writer's room was like, let's show the trials and tribulations of a hostess.
Well, it does two things. It does exploit, not exploit. It does like demonstrate the exploitation that like women in hospitality are subjected to, but it also does create an accurate picture of what happens when the dominoes start to go a little awry in restaurant service, because Tanya's getting backed up by this table that is making sexual advances on her, so tables can't get sat, so they're all going to be ordering their food at the same time, and it's going to start to back up the kitchen, which leads to some real chaos on Jack's end that we see.
I fully agree. Like, as somebody who's worked in front, like, and back of house situations, you put it so beautifully, Max. Like, it shows how shitty it is to be a woman in that kind of world sometimes, but also just like, everyone's there to get their job done, regardless of if they're super passionate about it like Jack, or if they're kind of just there to have a job like Tanya probably. But like, it's all important in the domino line of how it works. And the other thing I thought that they actually did portray pretty well, granted, like with a little extra like cavalierness on top of it, but like when the thing does happen that we're about to get to, he acts like I think any real chef would, like, okay, like, let's keep going. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And that's pretty accurate too.
I'd be very remorseful if I did not mention that food safety is a really important thing in restaurants. And our sous chef decides to put some veal down his pants as he talks about it way too romantically.
Yeah.
And we never see it go down the pants, but we know it went down the pants, and that's enough for us.
There's some poor like network censor at Fox who's like, all right, you can say the veal went down his pants, but you can't show the veal down the pants.
So as we are going through and like hearing and seeing Steven, Steven starts to haze Jim, our little naive Utah boy.
Would you say he was lighting a fire under his ass?
Oh,
God.
would I?
Boom.
Talk about Foley work. The blowtorch sounded like a blowtorch that was used during a world war. It was so powerful yet so small at the same time.
Yeah, that was a Geneva Convention law-breaking creme brulee torch.
And during this misfit and during this hazing, Steven does get his comeuppance, and he proceeds to lose the tip of his thumb.
Wait, hold on. What word did you just say?
Comeuppance?
I think you added an extra letter in there.
Were you saying crumbuppins because we're talking about food, or was it a misspeak?
I think I said comeuppance, which is still incorrect.
which is comeuppance for Kermit the Frog.
Yes,
Oh my
yes.
God. Oh.
Okay, got it. I thought I was like, did I miss the joke? Okay, I'm sorry to be.
Jeff did not get the 2-part stellar education from Jack's monologue.
Okay, sorry. Gets his comeuppance.
Yes, so Steven gets his comeuppance. I think I pronounced it correctly that time. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for that stellar education. I do use it most of the time. And the kitchen, as we said, just continues. We do have to find the tip of the thumb, but they do.
And where does that end up?
It does end up in a dish that does go out. So we get this chaotic moment where they pull
all the plates.
Pull all the plates. And Mimi doesn't understand why to pull all the plates, so she proceeds to bring the single plate that hasn't been examined out, which just happens to be going out over to our food critic, who then...
Oh, how could it not? That's good. That's just good writing.
Yeah, and then rather than... It was such a missed opportunity because, like, she brings it over, she places it, she sees the thumb, rather than, like, trying to have her avoid seeing the thumb and, like, having conversation. They're just like, oh, let's do the slapstick thing of just grabbing the entire piece of sea bass with the thumb in one foul swoop and then leaving the restaurant.
I have a weird thing for body horror in any TV show, but this one really made me like pretty ill, I would say, just from the spurting of blood, which was I don't know, I would say $2 special effects.
Red acrylic paint.
Yeah. And yeah, I immediately spurting on Jim, who is can't even say anything even remotely close to a cuss word. I think was a perfect fainting spell moment from a TV show that could have aired 70 years ago.
Yeah, it was just, we needed, as we've been saying, there needs to be a problem. There needs to be something that sort of piques the interest of the audience. And this one just sort of fell flat. It was fairly easily solved. And after it's solved, we see Jack getting changed. A very drunk woman who's coming from her bachelorette party decides to, put one last thing in her mouth, as she said.
I don't know how that got past network censors.
That was amazing.
I don't know how somebody wrote it. I don't know how somebody wrote it, but it also made me mad because I knew it was coming. I was like, let's hear it. Let's hear what she's going to say. I know it's coming.
It was the one line in this show that did make me sort of be like, oh, there you go, Darren Star. I missed you so much.
I mean, this is a network. I think Fox and when this came out, their largest amount of money was spent on American Idol, and then B, Family Guy, because those two have to be like putting that much money behind Family Guy and really riding that out as like this is our premier like original programming thing. I think this was pretty tame, but also like this probably aired 7 p.m. Thursday night or something like that. This is not the crowd for it.
It was so bad. And then it was the very classic, like,
it's not what it looks like.
It's not what it looks like. It was so trash. I could not.
Yeah, and not only do they do the joke once, but remember, repetition in comedy is key. So they do it twice. And Jack's girlfriend
back to back, baby,
sees it. And also, I thought that was actually another pretty funny line. Like, Sue's saying, you're too dumb to come up with a story like that, so I believe you, was actually like, it was... Can we talk about Suze for a minute? Suze is the star of this pilot, even though she's in it for like 2 minutes. And I really... Andrea Parker, who I know from Pretty Little Liars and Desperate Housewives, literally just destroyed her time on the show, even though it was like 2 minutes of screen time.
When we find out about what she did at the end, I was like, my heart was sort of touched. I was like, oh, we've all had something like that happen where we like still want the best for us. I think she crushed it too.
Yeah, she's the one person who's really in Jack's corner. And I will say one of the very textbook effective pilot writing things you get with this scene in the locker room is like you give Jack that like all is lost moment. You watch his professional career's second chance seemingly going down the drain with everything that's gone wrong in the kitchen. You see his personal life seemingly going down the drain with Suze walking in on him and this drunk bachelorette. And then we just like hard cut to like the end of the night, end of service winding down, which I believe is the same night. They're not very clear on it.
Yeah, they definitely make it seem like he's had a hard night. He's changing into his civvies and then is set to go on his way.
Into his what?
His civilian clothing?
His civilian clothing.
Oh.
Thank you for your service.
Good day,
sir.
I got it, Jeff.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Irene. I'm glad that I'm getting my comeuppance. Now, as far as we go through, we do get Reese Ryder's review of the restaurant. And
the fastest review to ever be published.
Was it in a newspaper?
It was in a newspaper.
Pino
comes out with
Pino's
a
holding a newspaper.
Yeah, at fucking whatever. It was 2 a.m.
Yeah, the advance copy, of course.
It's almost like
no editing at this newspaper.
It's almost like when with the Super Bowl, where after they win, they have the team who won on the Super Bowl like they have the photo and they give the players the newspapers. It's like
the New York Times had 2 different editions. They had one with a good review for Nolita and one for a bad review of Nolita.
And Pino comes out and proceeds to give Mimi sort of the business by saying, "Hey, front of house got a really bad review. They were fully blamed for this being a bad experience. But then the food got a great review. Jack is ready to celebrate. He's invited out with the crew.
And then he does the yeah, I am ready to celebrate. That too.
Yeah, Jack is a changed man. And we go to, the end of the pilot where he goes to return to his girlfriend, Suze, who has decided to leave him because she thinks she can predict the future and that Jack will fall into his old ways, but she hopes he does not. And that sort of ends the pilot as a whole.
Well, we do get one last button joke in the credits of Steven doing whippets in the kitchen, but for all intents and purposes, Suze's letter ends the episode.
Look, as a whippets expert,
oh my
he was just eating whipped cream. I immediately thought, whoa, is someone about to do whippets on national television? And I was disappointed.
Again, the sense at Fox, you can imply he's been doing nitrous in the kitchen, but you cannot show it.
The note that she left actually, I hate that this show made me feel any real emotions, right? But I was like, I've wanted the best for somebody and had to leave. That sucks. And she did I know you alluded to it before, Jeff, but the resume thing and it was cute.
Yeah,
it was very sweet.
It was just it was a very sweet note that did not belong in this show.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. I also was a little upset that this kind of implied that we wouldn't hear from Suze ever again for the rest of the show.
We can definitely find her in we can find her in unnamed Little Italy restaurant number 5.
Suze has the best emotional arc in this episode, and she's 6th on the call sheet here because she's the one where it's she goes from the boss to learning that she's actually the girlfriend to her pushing him out to Nolita and eventually leaving him so he can fulfill his potential, because of course the show has to end with a white man fulfilling his potential. But she has a better arc than anyone else, and yet we're saying goodbye to her, which sucks.
I do want to talk about things that we loved, and I talked a little bit about how I think Suze is the best character in this pilot that is not about Suze. What were some other things that y'all loved about this show? It did come out in 2005. I think we mentioned that. Was there anything else that happened in 2005 that might have affected this show?
Max. He's been wanting to talk about this since he found this out.
So we'll get into this a little bit more in the legacy section, but the show aired its first 3 episodes on Fox, and then it went on a hiatus so Fox could broadcast the
Baseball.
For Major League Baseball, for them to air the World Series, which was the year that Rich Inman's Chicago White Sox won the World Series. So this show went on a break so Rich could watch his hometown childhood team win a World Series.
I was going to say, that could... I was wondering if that meant at some point when I was 14 years old that I had watched Kitchen Confidential.
You've at least watched ads for it.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I think my favorite thing is how hard this show tries to use 70s rock and roll to make Jack seem edgy without giving him any actual edge. The pilot episode is named for a Rolling Stones album.
Which he doesn't come up at all.
It never comes up. There's no Stones music in this episode. There's no budget for music supervision. We see him walking around his house in a CBGB.
Yeah, I was about
t-shirt.
to say the CBGB t-shirt just was
I started to say John because CBGB closes a year after this show airs and is now a John Varvatos store.
Oh, no.
So it's just there's all of
Bradley
these things
Cooper,
that
why did
try
you do
to
it?
make. They try to give him this Anthony Bourdain rock and roll Lower East Side energy, but they don't actually do anything. They're trying to, but they're failing.
Yeah, it's very... it's really interesting seeing what this show went out to try to accomplish and what it ended up accomplishing. Was there anything else that you guys really, like, we didn't talk about it, but you loved about this show?
I mean,
The dead silence is a giveaway.
I liked how many women drank Cosmopolitans, so you knew that Darren Star was involved.
It's his calling card. It's like the Pharrell beat at the beginning of his songs.
Yeah, a 4 count, yeah.
It was like so 2005.
Yeah.
Which I do appreciate, like, the time capsule nature of it.
Let's talk about things that made us maybe tilt our heads. And in our notes, I just have, is this the horniest network show ever made? Discuss.
We have covered 2 Steven Levinson HBO comedies in Entourage and Ballers, and this show would make Vinny Chase and Spencer Strassmore blush red in the cheeks.
One of those shows had a lot of nudity in the pilot, and I still think this is hornier than that show.
Oh, when Sam Pancake comes in and he's like, there's a table of overly drunk women, and then there's a beat, and then they all try to run to the table like
what is
there's
that
not.
joke?
They gave their server their underwear.
Yeah, I mean, we have covered the only other possible answer that I could have for is this the horniest network show ever made? And Father of the Pride is easily one of the ones that's up there, because the entire plot is around, is John Goodman's tiger character going to fuck? Are they finally going to fuck? The entire
most network pilots, even Everybody Loves Raymond, half of Raymond is like, is Raymond going to fuck tonight? But there's a line at the end of this too. We mentioned Jack turning down the party to go home and celebrate in his own way, but he gets invited out by Steven, and the line that Steven pitches him to go party is, Tanya and Chloe, who I don't think we've met Chloe at this point, are going to hang out at their place with their friends who are models and frequently naked.
It's just insane. Like, what Fox allowed to be shown or allowed to be written, all in the sense of, hey, this is Anthony Bourdain's, like, based off of Kitchen Confidentials. We want to promote that rock star chef lifestyle. It just all seems really in vain, because it doesn't really hit that well. Is there anything else that really, when you saw this show, that made you take pause? Wait a minute. Did I really just hear what I heard or saw what I saw?
Obviously, my favorite joke of the entire episode, the when you slip up, I'm going to be there to take your picture. And then he yells, cheese. And then Jim brings him cheese.
That was, I did chuckle. I was pretty happy about that.
Why did they do that?
It was hard. It was true. And like, I love TV. I love suspending reality. I love not being in my own thoughts. But like, it was so hard to accept that, like, this kitchen doesn't have and I know I keep harping on this. There's just no way that this kitchen didn't have a staff and didn't have anything and, like, didn't have any food. Like, it was
basically an empty Old Navy for most of this.
Yeah, it was just so, like, two-dimensional in the world of just, like, this literally couldn't have happened ever. It takes restaurants months and months and months and months and months to open. And they always get pushed off. And, like, I think if they had even explained, like, a little, it would have been better. But it was like, I just don't think this is the vibe.
Yeah, but Irene, then we wouldn't have gotten the crew montage.
Well, here's another thing that I just want to, sprinkle in there. This show came out in 2005. Fox had another cooking show come out in May of 2005. Can anyone guess what that show is?
Wait, on Fox?
On Fox.
Wait, is it Hell's Kitchen?
Hell's Kitchen premiered in 2005 in May, and that show literally is only about opening nights, basically. So how the hell did they not even just give Gordon Ramsay a call saying, hey, do you want to get an EP credit and just come on the set and yell at people for us?
I don't understand how you have someone like that on your network's payroll and you do not have any sort of culinary consulting on this show. We don't see a culinary skill more advanced than chopping, and even that involves someone's thumb
and
getting
Bradley
cut
Cooper's
off.
chopping chives with 2 knives in the beginning. I don't know if anyone noticed that.
So-
but he has 2 knives.
I do want to talk. I do want to talk about Bradley Cooper's post Kitchen Confidential kitchen career, because he was in a little movie called Burnt, which is basically also Kitchen Confidential that no one saw. But during the process of preparing for that film, he was quoted in saying, "I shucked 1,000,000 oysters just to be able to prepare for that," which, one, is a gigantic waste of oysters, but two, there's no way that that human being shucked 1,000,000 oysters at all. But God bless him for the fact that he tried a little bit harder for something even fewer people saw. We have so many questions about this this pilot, but there's some other folks who have some questions, and let's go into our in-flight calls. And we have a question here from a viewer that I'm going to play for us right now.
Hey guys, longtime listener and friend of the pod, Michelle here. Super pumped about Kitchen Confidential, but I have one question for you. We saw a young Bradley Cooper play our Anthony Bourdain-esque character, but I want to know from the group, if you could select any actor, living or dead, to play Emeril Lagasse in a pilot, who would it be?
Oh, that's so good.
So thank you to Michelle for that amazing question. I have no less than 3 answers for this question, but I want everyone here to give me whom they think should be a great character to play, or a great actor to play Emeril Lagasse.
I'm going to step up and go first. I need to see James Gandolfini do it. And it's not just because he's a heavyset guy, but I think that would just be like an absolute perfect turnaround from The Sopranos to play a fucking extremely jovial Cajun chef.
To piggyback off of Rich's, I'm also going to choose a Sopranos cast member. Michael Imperioli.
Yes.
I think would be sensei.
Incredible.
God, I'm over here looking up how tall is Emeril Lagasse, trying to figure out.
So while Max is trying to figure that out, Gandolfini was one of my choices
instantaneously.
But I have 2 others that I would be remiss not to say. One is Paul Giamatti. I think Paul Giamatti would absolutely kill. But also, we have to go for an Italian man that is close to my heart, and we already sort of mentioned him on the show. Tony Shalhoub, I think, would be a great Emeril Lagasse. There's something quite, charming about him as an actor, and I think that he would nail it, especially if we tried giving him a little bit of a Cajun accent.
We just can't stop dropping Monk references.
I think call me crazy.
Deal.
But
Go
I
ahead.
think Danny DeVito would be fun to see.
Oh my God, yes.
Because he's just so obsessed with wanting to be a chef, much like Bradley Cooper, I feel like Jon Favreau thinks that this is his shot at an Academy Award.
Oh, you got it. Oh, you got it.
Damn, that's really good.
That's really, really good. So we also got a couple other questions. If you do want to leave us a voicemail, we'll make sure to leave that number at the end of the show. But we got a couple of questions, a couple DMs on Instagram from our dear friend John. And John asked us if this show would be better if we cast The Rock as Jack Bourdain. And in addition, he also asked us, if we don't cast The Rock as Jack Bourdain, whom would we cast as Jack Bourdain?
Absolutely better with The Rock, because you could keep having physical comedy bits of him being too big for the kitchen line.
I like to imagine that at some point there is a studio executive who wanted nothing more than to make a slapstick multicam sitcom called What the Rock is Cooking, where he plays a short order cook at a small town diner. If no one has, I'm gonna write it.
And is there anyone else that you would want to possibly cast for this role? Maybe someone who's more recent, maybe someone during 2005 who was living the dream.
Yeah, who looks like he chain smokes a lot.
I had to look up his name, but I think John C. McGinley would actually kind of.
Oh, that's a really good choice.
Hell yeah.
I was trying to just think of tall actors, and from like people who were big in this time,
Literally.
Clive Owen is the first person who came to mind for me. Bourdain's a big dude. He's actually 6'4".
What?
So yeah, Clive
Bourdain was
Owen.
6'4".
Bourdain was 6'4", which is super intimidating.
Yeah. Big
And the
daddy
other
vibes
person who
left
came
and
to
right.
mind, if he were to slim
Oh,
down a
love
little
that.
bit for the role, would be Lee Pace as Anthony Bourdain.
Ooh.
So I'm gonna give one other Wedding Crashers cast member who I think would nail this, and that is Vince Vaughn.
Vince
I
Vaughn.
think would be great in this role. Talk about a tall boy who also was hot.
Talk about them tall
Talk
boys.
about them tall boys, who was also super hot in 2005. I'm also gonna throw down Ted Danson if we were looking for an older person to play this
Oh,
role.
That's good.
I like that.
I could definitely see Ted Danson absolutely nailing this.
Well,
So
cheers to that answer.
thanks to John and Michelle for those awesome questions. As we start to descend, I do want to talk a little bit about the legacy of this show. So, this show only had 4 episodes air. There were a total of 13 of them that were created. You can purchase all 13 of those on Amazon via DVD. We watched this episode via a different service, and you can go and try to find it if you dare.
Yeah, we're not condoning anything of this nature, but if you were to type in Kitchen Confidential pilot into a search bar, you might find it pretty
or
easily.
Kitchen Confidential full series download. I think that's all of them are fine. I think in the nature of Bradley Cooper being forced to wear a CBGB shirt, I think he would tell you to pirate some stuff.
So let's talk a little bit more about the legacy of the show. So this show has something in common with a lot of failed pilots and a lot of failed TV shows that we've watched, which it was shown out of order. The most popular episode was episode number 4, which featured a French chef, and that was actually episode number 9 if you watch the DVD. We talked a little bit about the White Sox being a major interrupting factor to this show's success in the 2005 World Series. But any other legacy facts that anyone else might have?
I will say,
Well,
let's not blame the White Sox too much because they only lost 1 game the entire playoffs. So they tried to get this over with so we can get back to Kitchen Confidential like immediately.
The thing is, the World Series ends, and they still take like another 8 weeks off from Kitchen Confidential, where apparently they just showed reruns of Prison Break in its place. Like, they're sitting on all these episodes, and they're just choosing not to. But I think it's actually very funny in terms of TV history that this show and Arrested Development were canceled on the exact same day by Fox.
Yes, and they both have the same exact legacy.
And same quality.
Yeah, I'd watch a Kitchen Confidential reboot on Netflix for sure.
Well, we already know who's
Well, I
who
think
to
that
cast.
leads us to our next question, Jeff.
Yeah, that does lead us to our next question. But before we get to that question, Rich, it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Rich's Game of the Week. And
Ding,
I
ding,
will
ding,
give
ding,
you the
ding,
mic.
ding. It's the Crazy Frog. All right. All right. It's a very, very short Game of the Week this time. The last couple weeks, I have been telling people to spot the fake, but we're also still we're going to spot the real in this list, but it's going to be a very short list. It is a little gross, so I'm going to give a little bit of a trigger warning for body horror. Which of these instances are real of people finding a human appendage in their food? Number 1, a man found a tip of a finger in a Cole's frozen custard and didn't realize it until after it was in his mouth and took all of the ice cream off, thinking it was a piece of candy. Number 2, a Las Vegas woman found a human finger in her Wendy's chili. Number 3, a 6-layer burrito. What? A woman in Canton, Ohio found a human earlobe in her 5-layer burrito at Taco Bell. Which one of the 3 do you think is real?
It's B. It's the second one.
The
What
chili?
do we got?
I
I thought the chili story was a fraud, so I'm going to say earlobe in the burrito.
I'm going to also go with the chili.
Wow, all three of you are wrong. It was
What?
the finger in the frozen custard. Max,
That was the grossest one.
I know, and that was the one I gave the most detail about. So Max, you were absolutely right. The human finger in the Wendy's chili was fake. A woman essentially put her husband's like already amputated finger in there to try to sue Wendy's to get money, and then she ended up costing Wendy's from that story of her planting that in the chili, cost the company $2.5 million, and she did jail time for it.
That's amazing. And then you just wanted to make a really funny
I
pun.
wanted to make the 6-layer burrito joke so bad.
Burrito. What?
Well, thank you for that game, Rich. I do want to go to that question, though. Do we think this pilot could be made today? And if so, what would need to change about it, or where do you think you would find it?
I think the show itself physically could be made today. We touched on the bear up top and how they are sort of similar in these like redemption arcs of people in the culinary world. I think food media is so hot right now that a version of this could be made today. I do not think that this version could be made today for all of the sexism, mild racism we see when he's in the kitchen with Teddy, just the negative tropes throughout it. But I do think that Kitchen Confidential in some way, shape, or form could exist in 2022.
I fully agree. I think that if it was like completely rewritten and the vibe of it was completely reformed, it would be a fun show to watch. I loved The Bear. Loved it. And like, I think if it was a legit like telling of the story of a high like fine dining restaurant that the chef drops out at the last minute and they have to fill it with somebody, be it somebody who was a world-renowned chef that fell from grace, like I think that'd be a great show to watch. But I definitely like don't need Jim in it, you know?
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. I think there's I love the book Kitchen Confidential. If someone tried to make an adaptation of that book into another TV show, I'd watch it. But every single show that I've seen, including the movie Chef is also a white chef male redemption arc story, which is like, you know, how many times are we going to see that in that particular type of media? But if they try to change it up and make it a little bit more about like maybe exposing the dirtier secrets of the kitchen industry, I think that would probably be better.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, Rich. I think that I do truly love Kitchen Confidential, the book. If there was a network or a streaming platform that said, we're going to do it true to the book, then we would absolutely do so. And I would absolutely be tuned in for the first episode. With that being said, would you continue watching this version of the show?
I am afraid not, because I think Suze is gone.
What about you, Max?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think Suze is coming back, and I did check IMDb. Reese Ryder's only in this one episode. I cannot recommend diving into more of this show's run, especially when it would probably require me to buy a full series of it on Amazon.
And Irene, round us out.
No.
And I will be sure to say, so fun fact about this show, it took me an hour to watch this 26-minute pilot given the platform that we chose to watch it on. But if you choose to go against all of our advice and watch this, you can find some of the other episodes on YouTube. So do as you dare.
Fully out of order.
Yeah. With that being said, as we begin to land this plane, where can we find all of y'all? Irene, where can we find you?
You can find me at Homemade by Irene on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And you can find my YouTube channel at Irene Walton. That's my little baby. I'm really proud of everything on there. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Oh, I think, yeah, that's it.
And also,
Where can I find
You can
guys?
find me sitting at the end of the bar at Nolita sipping a Cosmopolitan. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Maxwell Singh.
And you can find me at Damn That's Rich on Instagram. You can find Max and my comedy on TikTok at Dadwagon Comedy.
and just to further plug Irene, you can find her web series Dead Dad's Kitchen as well as Bites of History. And you can find me at Run Jeff Run on Instagram and Twitter. You can find the TV Pilots License on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Pilots License. If you have a question about the show or for our next episode, you can email us at tvpilotslicense@gmail.com or give us a call at 213-290-1713. And make sure to watch out for our Instagram for a sneak preview of some of our upcoming episodes. With the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you. Thanks again to Irene for joining us, and until then, stay safe and have a great day.